All right, folks. Hey, welcome to another Figure for All Fridays. This is a pretty big and exciting one. So first of all, if you're just now tuning in, go ahead and throw up a comment. Tell us, say hello, and let us know you're there. We appreciate that. We got a few viewers up there already. We also appreciate comments all throughout this. So we're going to do things a little differently today. As we go through, there's a lot of stuff I want to cover. And as we go through this, normally we kind of do the Q&A at the end. Let's do it as we go along. So if you see a good question that pops up, Aaron, go ahead and throw it up on even if we're talking about something else, we'll get to it immediately. So again, say hello if you haven't done so already. Throw that in the comments. We want to say hi to you. And Glenn, we really appreciate you coming. And I'm really excited about this. Summer's probably not, but I'm really excited to have you. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come out here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right.
Dan's here.
We got Dan here. Ed, good evening, Ed. How are you doing? We'll wait for a few more people to pop in here. And again, so if you guys didn't know, if you haven't seen my thumbnail that I put up, as a matter of fact, Glenn, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you believe in, and where you're coming from.
Sure. Lifelong conservative Republican. I'm a recent refugee from Washington, D.C., moved to the Panhandle this summer, bought a house just here in the neighborhood. Really enjoying it. Glad to be among real Americans. I got a Ph.D. in political philosophy at the Claremont Graduate School in California. Wrote a book recently, which is about a professor I had who's a really interesting, patriotic student of political philosophy who studied the principles of the founding and tried to explain them. And I thought a lot of his teachings and scholarship were important and relevant. So that book just came out. It's called The Soul of Politics, Harry V. Jaffa and the Fight for America. I'm a fellow with the Claremont Institute, which is a conservative think tank in California devoted to teaching the principles of the founding and how they apply to our political controversies today. I've been affiliated with Hillsdale College in Michigan, small conservative liberal arts college there, and do a lot of writing. You can find my writings at The American Mind and also a site called AmericanGreatness.com.
Nice. Yeah, so I kind of want to let everybody know how this came about. I thought it was a very serendipitous kind of situation. I remember last year sometime I came across an article called "Conservatism is No Longer Enough," and it was very impactful on me. And I posted the link in the comments. Feel free to check that out. And I'm actually going to use that kind of as an outline as we go through this. But it was probably one of the most, it probably had one of the biggest impacts of the article that I've read in a long time, because it really said things in a much better way, in a much more articulate way, things that I've been believing for a long time. And we'll go through and hit these points, but it really made an impact on me. And then not too long after that, and I saw who the author was. I actually looked him up at that point. I want to know who this guy was. And then not too long after that, I had just gotten a subscription to Fox Nation, and then I came across one of Tucker Carlson's the Tucker Carlson Today show with him on it and talking about that particular article. I was like, wow, that's kind of weird. And again, and that just tells you, he's used to slumming around these little studios, not these big ones like we got here. But I was like, wow, that's really cool. Well, the next thing I know, fast forward like a year or so, there's a guy picking up some products, and his name is Glenn Ellmers. So it was like, Summer, is that guy? Is that an author? Have you talked? She talked to him. I think you had emailed Summer a few times and things like that. Well, he showed up, and I immediately recognized him. Hey, are you that guy? And,
are you that guy?
I was like a 14-year-old girl. I was like, hey, what's going on? I was really excited. So I was really excited, and come to find out, he lives right down the road. So again, I think it was a very unique kind of situation, and just pretty neat. I just thought it was really, really cool. And then, I asked him, hey, any chance we can get you on here? And, I told him I'd give him a discount on something for sure. So,
Little Brad. Little Brad never heard.
That's kind of where we're at.
Right, you're on record saying that. They've all heard it.
We got you taken care of, but I guarantee that. So again, if you are just tuning in, go ahead and say hello, throw a comment up there, and we will be jumping into this shortly. So again, if you want to, it'd be a really good idea, whether it's now or later on, look up the article, "Conservatism is No Longer Enough." But what I wanted to do, even before I thought of going about it, doing it this way. I started laying out some topics, and then I went back and I was reading through some of his other things, including this article again. And I was like, really what I had laid out was pretty much an outline of this article. So I'm just going to go through and kind of extract some of these major points out with that he made in this, and kind of dig a little deeper into them. So just starting off right off the bat, Glenn, in this article, you talk about, the United States has become two nations.
Right.
And I definitely agree that we have never been more divided than we have before. And you might even be able to break it up even further than that. But tell me a little bit about what you mean specifically.
Right. Well, maybe the way to compare it is the last time we were so divided was the Civil War. But as Lincoln pointed out, even in the Civil War, he said, both North and South read the same Bible and pray to the same God, right? So there was this tremendous division over an immensely controversial issue, slavery, along with some other issues. But the country wasn't radically divided on some of the most fundamental beliefs. Today, I don't think we can still say that everyone in the United States reads the same Bible and prays to the same God. I mean, we certainly have people who may not be Jewish and Christian, but even whether people believe in God or any kind of God, or whether they're pagans or something else, that's a pretty serious division. And then along with that are very deep political divisions, not just about one major policy issue, but about the most fundamental questions about the meaning of life, the purpose of government, where our rights come from, whether there's a human nature, or whether we can simply become anything we want, manipulate human nature, mess up the hormones of little kids to turn boys into girls. There are people who believe that. And that's a very fundamental split about the most basic questions. And so it becomes a real challenge to wonder whether we can continue to be fellow citizens together in the same country.
No, I agree. Like, when you look across the aisle, it is really hard. It's really hard to find any common ground. And we are so diametrically opposed to the main things, to big topics, that you're right. I don't know how to bridge that gap. And honestly, I don't know that it can be bridged. And I don't know how civil discourse can even continue. We see what's going on with that. I mean, the reality is that there's one side of the aisle that looks at me, who I think is a pretty traditional guy that believes the same things that our founders did. And they think immediately that I am scum of the earth, that I don't deserve a voice. I don't deserve to have a business. If they lock us up, I truly believe that they could just lock us up, throw away the key when it comes to conservatives and people with fundamental Christian values. I think they would. I really do. And you see how they react to any disagreement, anything even out of lockstep. And I guess, conservatives within our own are a little bit like that to some extent, but not nearly as bad. And I will say that we definitely give liberals or the left or Democrats a lot more grace than they give us. We have been extremely open and accepting to what we think are crackpot ideas, to be honest. But hey, let's hear them. They no longer even want discourse. They think it's a waste of time.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, look, most conservatives, most people on the right, Republicans, think if San Francisco wants to just go down the toilet and have people crapping on the sidewalk and all that stuff, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the left does not treat us that way.
No.
They will not leave us alone.
No.
Right? No. That's the big problem, is they will not leave us alone.
They want to eradicate us.
Yeah. I mean, this demonization, basically calling everyone who's to the right a white supremacist, basically by default, if you're on the right, you're a white supremacist. The way the government is being more and more militarized and politicized, Nancy Pelosi has now basically turned the Capitol Police into the private guards of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
The FBI is more and more politicized. These are very scary developments.
Well, and I think this is very strategic too. And they've been trying to, for the last couple of years, they've been saying that white nationalism is the number one threat to national security. Well, anytime you have a threat to national security, that means that we can now implement and start mobilizing all of our national security apparatus. That includes the CIA, the NSA, and now they're talking about even putting together these national security task force or whatever it was. But along those lines, but they're making it clear that we're moving in a direction where we're going to start mobilizing all the assets that were originally put together, designed to combat terrorism overseas in the global war on terrorism. Now we're going to start redirecting those assets and those capabilities toward U.S. citizens.
Right.
And folks, I mean, just the fact they're saying that out loud, whether they've implemented it or not. And you know what? Here's the thing, too, is if they're talking about it, they've already started doing these things, without a doubt.
There was a revelation was it today or yesterday, that I mean, we all knew this, right?
Yeah.
That the CIA has been collecting massive amounts of data on the American people. The CIA is supposed to be engaged in spying on other countries. Yeah. And here they're using billion, $trillion budget, whatever they have, to spy on Americans.
I mean, it's just like the Obama administration that used the FBI against all conservatives that they possibly could.
Yeah. Of course.
And even several journalists, and that barely even bat. Most people had never even batted an eye. And here's the thing that goes back to that is everybody on the left was like, good, they should be investigating those guys. Like, what? Like, you want them wiretapping somebody that just happens to report for it was Fox News? They're reporting for Fox News. They don't like Fox News, so again, send them all to the gulag. I mean, that's kind of the.
Can I just? There's an interesting point there about the journalists and people on the left, and this is another thing that I find amazing and surprising is there used to be a lot of people to the left who really were liberals, like liberals in the old-fashioned sense. Remember when the ACLU stood up for the rights of the Nazis to march in Skokie? There was a very famous case.
They were more libertarian, almost.
Right. But the idea was, and it used to be that a lot of liberals understood this, that free speech only works when it applies to everyone. Due process of law only works when it applies to everyone. Equal protection has to be equal protection for everyone. And that seems to have gone out the window. I mean, more and more people on the left don't believe in freedom of speech for everyone. And when you give that, you would think it's obvious to them that when you start moving that line, eventually that line's going to get to you. Right. So I don't understand if it's just complacency or they just are so driven by hate or what, but it's an amazing phenomenon to see liberals give up all of these basic principles.
I feel like they think that the government's on their side. So it's their cause. And a lot of it is fear. I always believe that the reason that liberals shut down debate because their ideas, they never succeed on the floor of debate, right? They end up dying on the floor of debate. So that's just a speed bump because it's just a waste of their time. So, and all it does, they're not persuasive. So they have to be able to smear people when you start laying out what they actually believe. And that's the other thing too. Like, it's the Democrats that can only move things forward if they lie about it, they coerce you into it. They're not convincing anybody. And that is.
And when they can't convince you, they start name calling you.
Yeah,
that's right.
Labeling.
That's right. So. Well, they still, believe it or not, a lot of the people on the left still believe in this idea of progress, which is a kind of a version of communism, right? They really think history is on their side. History is moving to, bring about the liberal utopian agenda. And so they're completely convinced that they're morally superior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, they do think they're morally superior intellectually and everything else. So one of the other things that you talk about essentially authentic Americans or authentic America. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, that made me a fascist. I was told by many, many people.
What that means is white America. We all know that's immediately what they talk about. Right. I'm sure that's what they said.
What I meant by that is look, we shouldn't pretend that this division is just an even split between two reasonable points of view. That's not really the case. Our side, Red America, conservatives, whatever you want to call us, believe in the version of the country that existed from the beginning and basically was what almost everyone believed in, what was taught in schools, what even many ordinary Democrats believed until fairly recently, which was the principles of the Constitution as they were written, the principles of the Declaration, the idea that our rights come from God, they're not invented or given to us by the government. Those basic ideas are what our side believes in. And it's the other side that basically has invaded the country with a lot of foreign ideas that come from, I have an academic background in political philosophy, but that come from Germany and other sort of crazy European postmodern ideas. Those have been imported. They're antithetical to what America's always stood for. And so we are, in a way, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that our side is the authentic version of America, the version of America that the founders bequeathed, and that was the mainstream until very recently. Mm-hmm. But you're not allowed to say that, obviously.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, it really comes back to, do you believe in what this country was founded on? I mean, that's
Right.
really what that is about to me. And, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, being left alone by the government. The government serves us, not us serving the government. The government is beholden to us, not the other way around. And that's exactly what that means to me. Let's talk a little bit about Republican and the kind of the Republican split, I think, over the last couple of years. You actually stated that that many of the people from MAGA, or there's Republicans that voted for Trump Republicans, whatever you want to call them, that the party doesn't really care about them. Many may also, in some way, consider themselves conservatives, but really, the Republican Party, and now I'm kind of adding to what you said, is almost treats them as a pariah, or like they want your vote, but please stay away from us. We would never invite you to our house or be seen with you somewhere at a restaurant.
Right. So, there's people who criticize Trump because of his tweets, and I'm actually a little critical of Trump from the right because I think he didn't follow through on a lot of the things he promised. But one thing Trump did was he broke up and he exposed what I call the uniparty establishment. That is, there was a go along, get along attitude between both Republicans and Democrats in Washington for a long time. And Trump really cracked that wide open, which was a great benefit to the country. But there's still a lot of those establishment Republicans in Congress, in Washington, in the Beltway. I think the leadership of the Republicans, both the House and the Senate, are kind of, moderate, timid establishment conservatives. And they definitely want the MAGA votes, but they don't necessarily want to follow through on the promises they make. They don't want to follow through on the principles they claim to stand for. They like sending out fundraising letters and making promises, but the follow through is lacking. The MAGA voters, in a way, are still kind of without a party. There's good Republican people, Marjorie Taylor Greene and some others are good, but the party leadership is. But
lacking. Even her, I feel like the mainstream Republican Party is kind of like.
They definitely are.
They like Lynn Cheney more than they like.
The only thing Marjorie Taylor Greene has done for the Republican Party is they've had to sort of embrace Ted Cruz a little more because
she makes him look like a model.
She's like, I thought you were. You know what, Ted? Come on in. Let me protect you from her. No,
but Matt Gaetz and some others are
100%. There's and we're starting to see, I think, a new generation of conservatives that are a little bit more outspoken, that understand the playing field a little bit better. Because again, folks, I think we've gone so far as a Republican Party, go along to get along. They're not what we've had in the past. What we have right now are not really fighters. They're not worried about gaining ground. They were just worried about, conserving what they have, and they were slowly losing. They wanted to lose at the slowest rate possible. That's all they wanted to do.
That's right.
I mean, it's almost embarrassing. I mean, you look at some of what we haven't accomplished and what the left has accomplished in the last couple, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that we put through socialized medicine, and now that's a standard norm, and we're going to go even farther left than that. And so many other. The only thing that we've kind of could claim a few victories here and there, and that's really at the state level, is on gun rights, and even not that, we're not doing that good.
Still fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, it really is. We're losing slower than we ever had before on that issue too, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In fact, I'll hold off on that. You talked about how conservatives were alarmed and repelled by Trump's rough manner and his evil tweets, and in that our norms were now hopelessly corrupt and need to be destroyed. Trump realized that. But you said in almost every case, the political practices, institutions, and even rhetoric governing the United States become hostile to both liberty and virtue. Mainline churches, universities, pop culture, and corporate world are rotten to the core. I feel like I know what you mean there, but basically you're saying, hey, there's not a whole lot to conserve at the moment.
That's where the title comes from. Right. So we're sort of getting at this point a little bit earlier about the establishment Republicans, the uniparty establishment in Washington. They want to conserve the institutions we have, the practices we have, the norms. You hear this word of, my norms.
Right.
And my argument here, and that's where the title of the piece comes from, is there's hardly anything left to conserve anymore. Certainly not at the national level. I mean, in the states, at the local level, there's still, outposts of good people like DeSantis in Florida and Governor Abbott in Texas, and there's some good things happening at the state level. But at the national level, it used to be that we didn't have the federal bureaucracy and Hollywood was bad, right? But now, look, the corporate world is moving more and more to the left. Certainly, Silicon Valley and the big oligarchs who control social media are completely on the side of the left. Sports, when did that happen?
I know.
And now the military, more and more, is being infested.
What has happened the last couple of years in the military, I mean, it's just, it's reprehensible.
So the question is, can we even talk? Is it even useful to talk about the word conservative anymore? If we're not, maybe we need to use different language and think differently, that we're not conserving because so much has slipped away. What we need, in a way, is a counter-revolution. We need to get back the things that we've lost. And that's a little bit what the article addresses.
Even when Trump was running, and I was like, oh, but he's just so unpresidential in the way he presents everything. And Gary's like, we got to forget about that. Because the left doesn't worry about sounding presidential or sounding diplomatic. They just go at it. And that's what Trump's doing. And that's what we need.
Yeah.
They
want to win
the old stuff, and it's just gone. It's not going to be that way anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that was really when you started moving away from this unpresidential talk and personal attacks and like that. It was really under Obama. I just remember time after time after time. I was like, man, how does he get away with even talking like that? Now, Trump took it to another level. There's no doubt about that. But I wrote a note down here. It was said Trump best explained. But you said Trump understood that everything was broken and there needed to be a shakeup, right? We needed to drain the swamp essentially. But his problem was that he lacked discipline to target his creative destructive tendencies effectively. But even with greater discipline, he still would have lacked the insight to discern and explain what he needs to destroy and why. And I think that is Trump perfectly explained in that the guy has good instincts. Right. He's working on instincts. He does. He feels out the room. He feels the political pulse, and he goes in that direction. I still don't know how morally centered he is, or how much he believes in this, or if he just gets caught up in the fight. I think that in winning, in I do think he has a general sense of direction. Like, I know I need to go sort of this way. I don't have a perfect azimuth or why I'm going that way, but I just thought that was Trump best explained without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy has a lot of virtues. He has a kind of courage, which is not a virtue usually associated with him, but the willingness to stand up and take the kind of abuse he did and just keep fighting. It's impressive. But, maybe this is my academic background, my political background, but running the government is not something for amateur hour. And, for all the qualities he had, being a businessman does not qualify you to understand how the federal bureaucracy works, how Congress works, how to use the system against the system. Yeah. You actually have to know what you're doing a little bit. And part of Trump's problem was, he's not great at picking advisors and making friends. And so he didn't have the people around him, the experts who knew how the swamp works to help him navigate it and drain it. And so, maybe in the second term, he could have done more. We'll see. We'll see how the next presidential election goes.
Well, that's what that was kind of the next thing I was going to say was, it was strange to me. And you touch on this. It was really strange to me that Trump was the guy that he was and the anti-establishment that he was. But then the people that he would surround himself with, his advisors, you were just like, it was either super insiders or people like, I don't know, what was the lady from the show, Omarosa. So you had like these either super, Bill Kristol type conservatives, these inside, or like a complete, it was really strange.
And his family. I know I don't want to disparage anyone's family.
No.
But that they're not necessarily experts in politics just because they're related to him.
No. I think a lot of that was more about just putting people in the place that he felt like he could trust.
That he could trust, right? Exactly.
Because there was, we saw what was going on there. Kind of on a separate topic, not covered here, and just out of my own, I'm just curious to see what you think. So, part of, I hear a lot of people, really, really smart people on the politics side say, look, we can't have Trump run again. They're just going to make a monster of him. It's going to be more damage than profitable for us. I kind of feel like no matter who we put in there now at this point, the way that the left is taking the gloves off, the way that the media has taken their gloves off and really shown who they are, and they don't care.
Of course.
I think at the end of 4 years, no matter who we put into place is going to end up looking like Trump. What's your thoughts on that?
So every Republican is a Nazi, according to the Democrats. It doesn't matter. I mean, Mitt Romney, the mildest, weakest guy you could imagine, he was called a Nazi. John McCain, he was a perfectly nice guy, war hero. As soon as he gets the Republican nomination, Nazi, right? They do this automatically. So in a way, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Whoever gets the nomination is going to be attacked viciously. The issue with Trump is he also turns off some people on the right and in the middle. It's not just
starts whittling away his own insulation.
Right. Now maybe he's learned something. Maybe he'll do a better job surrounding himself with good people. I don't know. I'm sort of two minds about Donald Trump. He's not going to listen to me. He's going to do what he's going to do. But
maybe he should listen to you, Glenn.
Well, we'll see. I have plenty of advice to give him, but
he tunes in every Friday. So
if you're listening, here he is.
Donald, listen to Glenn. So that goes right into the next thing I had highlighted here is what we need. You said what we needed, of course, is a statesman who understands both disease afflicting the nation and the revolutionary medicine required for the cure. But no such figure has emerged, and it is unreasonable to pin our hopes on such a savior. So, who do you see? Who do you think gives us the best chance for 2024? And we'll get into midterms. I would definitely like to hear you talk about that. But 2024,
right? So everyone talks about DeSantis. I mean, I'm on board with that. Everything I see from the guy, I know people who in Florida, a lot of people have moved to Florida because of DeSantis. I've been down to Florida, for the Tucker Carlson show that was taped in Florida. I liked getting. I was living in D.C. At the time. I went down to Florida and got to take my mask off and walk around. Get away from the little tyrants who run DC. So yeah, I mean, everything DeSantis seems to say the right things, do the right things. He has presence. He speaks well. He seems to be principled. So that would be fine with me. Trump, in a way, it would almost be worth it just to see him drive the left even more crazy if that was possible. Again, it's whoever gets the nomination, I'm going to support. We'll just have to see what happens.
I do think, like you said, I would love to see Trump reelected just for them to lose. I mean, I think literally heads will explode at some point. But I also think that it will probably, again, the press will, just tear him to pieces over the next 4 years. I think we'll get very little done. And I also think, come 2028, I think we would lose the White House. And almost definitely the House of Senate.
I mean, among other considerations, we have to get away from living under this gerontocracy where everyone who runs the country is in their 70s and 80s.
Yeah, right.
That's another consideration.
It'd be nice to just have someone that is not senile. I mean, seriously, all joking aside, any of you that can look at anyone in the eye and say that Biden is no longer there.
I'm curious, do you have like a certain name of 2024, someone that you think is going to emerge on top for the nomination for Republican?
Besides DeSantis?
Yeah. You think DeSantis is number one running?
I think he's far and away the front runner right now. Yeah. I mean,
I'd be happy
Trump.
with that.
Trump is a wild card. If Trump does not get in the race, I think it's DeSantis' nomination.
So my feeling on Trump is almost, I think there's some Trump supporters that would be hesitant to vote for him again because they feel like it is going to be just such a circus and it's going to detract from him actually getting anything done.
Well, and I also think
I could be completely wrong.
He still has a ton of support, obviously.
He does.
But with that being said, I also think that if it came down to it, given another more palatable option, I think they would go with that. But that's what a primary is for. So.
Yeah, and it would depend also if Trump throws his support to someone or withholds it. That's enough. If he were to throw his support behind DeSantis or someone else and get the whole MAGA movement behind someone, that would change the dynamic too.
What do you think about a Trump DeSantis ticket? Trump being the top.
Trump at the top.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll take it over Biden.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Better than what we have now.
Remember how they all said Trump has to take the Montreal Cognitive Test?
Yeah.
I mean, they were talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
And now you got a guy who can't even complete a sentence, and no one's talking about that anymore.
The amazing thing, and I always point this out on Twitter, and I wish somebody would. Biden constantly tweets. I would love, there would be nothing that would be funnier, that would be higher comedy than watching Biden actually send a tweet. I would love, he tweets all day and I'm just like, no, Biden didn't tweet this. We know that he's not. No, it's definitely not. There's like full sentences, everything. So I know it's not. There's nothing in there about corn pop. There's nothing in there. I would love to just see him send an actual tweet. That'd be.
Does he even know what a cell phone is?
No,
that's what I was saying. I'm pretty sure he doesn't even know how to log into Twitter. Like, you know,
it doesn't even sound like Biden when you read his tweets. Like, no, that wasn't you. You're talking a little bit more here about kind of a plan and how we need to basically lay out a plan, both from a presidential standpoint and the type of people that we need to be representing the conservative movement. You said having a coherent plan, thinking through what American citizenship used to mean, what made it noble and made the country worthy of patriotic love, how to rebuild its best elements, require input from people and institutions who have given these matters a lot of thought. So that is 100% true. But I will also point out that I think that the difference right now between the right and the left is that the left is extremely strategic. I think they have clear laid out objectives and timelines of what they want to do, how they want to go about it, very detailed. And they have clear goals, 25, 30, 50 years down the road. I did not see any of that from the right. I feel like they're just trying to hold on. They're like, oh my God. You know, they're in a firefight. They're reacting to contact, and they're not. They do not have a strategic. They don't have a tactical plan, much less a strategic plan.
Right. So one thing, just to be fair to our side, well, I'll just to corroborate what you said. Think about George Soros putting all of these district attorneys in. That's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of long-term strategic thinking. Look at a way to get in. You know, something that had never been politicized before. They come in, big money, a plan, boom, 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 take over all these things. And you transform cities, you transform municipalities, you change the whole tenor of the country by doing this. Just to defend our side on this issue, when you're on the left, you live, breathe, sleep politics because most of these people don't believe in God. Most of these people have a kind of deranged view of the world where politics can solve all. It's a religion, exactly. Politics becomes a religion. You can solve all the problems of the world, and so they get up in the morning and they look at it and they say, well, "What can I do to, use politics to?" And so our side, in a way, is not because we have families and jobs and go to church and have real lives. We don't breathe, eat, and sleep politics, and we're not fanatical about it. And so, in a way, our side is always at a disadvantage because we're not fanatically devoted to controlling other people's lives the way the other side is.
We're just trying to live our life.
Exactly. So that's part of the reason that we don't have the kind of long-term strategic, fanatical desire to control everything. That's a real problem for us.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, right? I mean, in fact, we're losing the country. We really have to step it up and be more strategic.
I mean, it makes me scared for our two young sons, white male sons that I'm raising.
Right.
Well, that's no good.
I was just going to say, so the program you had the other day with the school board. So I don't have any kids, and I'm a fairly new resident of West Virginia, but I'm very interested in that. And I don't understand people, and I haven't been in the county long enough to know that this is a problem, but a lot of times you hear people say, well, the school board, that doesn't affect me. And my attitude, it should affect everyone should care about these school board elections, partly because we have to be involved in the community, but also, who do you think is going to be running the country in 15 or 20 years? Yeah. Right? Not just patriotic concern for what these kids are learning, but just your own interest. I'm not planning on checking out in the next 15 or 20 years. So I really want to make sure that the people who are running the country in 15, 20 years are getting a proper education today. So,
and that's not a way most people would look at it.
Yeah, well, right. But our side has to be a lot more focused on these issues of who's in charge of the schools, who's running the counties, because it's at the state and local levels, I think, where we're going to be able to save things.
Well, and again, just like we said the other day, Summer and I have been saying, again, I've always been a politics nerd. I've loved politics, and almost always at the national level, right? Every 4 years I have a Super Bowl. That's how I've always seen it. Summer knows
election night, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Summer knows I get crazy obsessed. I'm up all night if there's a presidential election. Yes. I'm watching, this last election, I got to see a really big comeback It was an amazing comeback from way behind. Last few minutes, they pulled it out. So where do you see though? Where do you see realistically? Where do you see our nation in 20 years from now?
You know the expression "black-pilled."
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to black pill all the audience, but I'm pretty worried. I would say it's time to really. So look, so you're obviously a very physically fit guy. Let me just get out of my academic hat a little bit and say, this is a good time now to focus on becoming a self-sufficient person, becoming a self-sufficient citizen, getting healthy, learning how to get by with fewer things. Look, we can see in the supply chain, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's a possibility of a financial crisis, there's a possibility of a war, right? All sorts of things can happen, and it's very easy to get complacent. And so I think, you know, the country is moving more and more to a point where things are going to possibly get hairy. And so people have to think about, you know, being able to take care of themselves. It's a good time to get healthy, get fit, get involved in your community, reach out to your neighbors,
Learn barter.
Be involved in the community, you know, pay attention to what's going on.
Stock ammo,
stock food, stock water. And what I like to say is also cultivate personal excellence. You know, that includes maybe reading up. You know, if the country gets to be even more in a crisis, a lot of basic fundamental questions we may think it's going to be very simple, right? The blue states versus the red states, the liberals versus the conservatives. No. But it's going to be much more complicated than that. And so it might be worthwhile to start thinking a little bit about politics and these issues. So, you know, stock up, think about being self-sufficient, think about being involved in your community, because if we don't turn things around, it's possibly going to get pretty hairy.
Yeah.
That's something we were always talking to our clients about, and people we come into contact with is learning to be more self-sufficient, not just in firearms training and that kind of thing, but in
medical training, medical courses. So I'm going to use this is a great opportunity for a shameless plug. So folks, one of the things that our clients have, we've been talking about this for a long time. You know, our clients have asked us to put together, and we did, was a family survival skills course. And it's specifically that practical stuff. We have a couple of those courses coming up. We'd love to have you out. But that's what it's about. It's learning basic skills that most people don't have anymore. How to start a fire, how to procure food, how to purify water, how to change a tire. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And what I want to kind of do is have this as a family camp where we're doing these things regularly, and every course will be a little bit different. So make sure you go to ParamountTactical.com. Go check that out. We'd love to have you out. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And so we used to offer a very similar course through the NRA. NRA used to have a division called the NRA.
NRA Outdoors.
NRA Outdoors. So we put together a survival course for them. We had a lot of fun with it. And we just kind of faded away from it more or less. And they closed that division as far as the training goes. But we would love to do that and get to know you on a more personal level and have a lot of fun and have the kids turn off the electronic devices and really appreciate company discussions like this, sitting around a campfire and having a really good time. So go check that out.
Just to clarify, it's not just for families. I mean, if you're a single guy or a lady that wants to come out and learn these skills, you're more than welcome. If you're a couple that wants to come out, you don't have to have a family to come out. It's for everyone.
Absolutely.
But it is family inclusive, and you are more than free to bring your children out.
And they'll learn some really good, important skills. They really will.
Yeah.
No, and again, I think I too, I'm really afraid. For a long time, I feel a little more optimistic. For a long time there, though, I was saying that, you know, if we don't see a civil war in my lifetime, I would honestly be surprised.
That for years.
Yeah. And I think we kind of hit a peak of it the last 2 years, just because we saw how militant and you know, really we saw all the riots that were going on all over the place. You know, it's hard to imagine. I don't know how we can reconcile these two belief systems that are now predominant. You have one belief system that is based on a constitution, and really even that's watered down. But even the most watered down version of that there's no compatibility with the other side, and it's hard to imagine. I don't know how we do it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that the immediate crisis may have seemed to have cooled off a little bit. It looks like the Dems and the liberals are backing off a little bit on the COVID restrictions. I'll bet you anything in a few months they're going to start saying, "Oh, we were never in favor of all that," and trying to shift the blame away.
They already are.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they already are. But long term, these differences are not going to go away. I think you're exactly right about it. I mean, we're living on two different planets, politically, intellectually, morally,
Yep.
and even if the immediate threat of violence or conflict doesn't seem to be right there, it's very hard to see how there's going to be any long term prospect of becoming one nation of citizens who believe in the same things.
I keep thinking of the movie Who is John Galt?
Right.
Atlas Shrugged. Yeah, so and we're already seeing this to some extent, but we're going to see very soon, and I think this is where we're going to start seeing a tipping point of we'll have a better idea of how things are going to go. We're definitely going to start seeing a censorship of, for instance, anything Christian, biblical, any of that stuff, and I think that's really going to make people wake up. And you already have a demonization that's taking place where if you're a Christian, again, you're for X, Y, and Z. You're a white nationalist. You're a racist. And we're going to get to a point to where all those things, if you have any Bible, scripture, or anything else, anything is going to start getting censored. And we're already moving that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing in the news just came out within the last couple of days. DHS issued another bulletin. They're now getting in the business of saying, well, it's a national security threat when people send out miss, and malinformation. And they came up with another government acronym for that. It's not the Department of Homeland Security's job to curtail misinformation being spread around by Joe Rogan. I'm sure it was Joe Rogan that caused this. But just think about the way these things just keep going and going and going. The Department of Homeland Security is now going to get involved in what you and I are saying to each other over YouTube as misinformation.
Well, again, if you don't believe in the Bible,
what is misinformation?
Right. Well, they do.
They define it, and that's the thing is if you're of that belief, and if you can't even say that ivermectin could possibly have some sort of therapeutic effect against, that's misinformation. Well, if that's what you believe, then I also have a pretty good idea how you stand when it comes to biblical items. So the moment you start posting these things about anything with biblical or anything else, that's misinformation too. I mean, it's already been established. It's just a matter of them actually starting to enact it. They're still a little, they're testing the waters, but we're going to start seeing that. I think there's no doubt about that. Yeah. This kind of goes right into that, as far as combating that and combating to the point to where we are. And actually, let me go back a little bit when we're talking about a strategy, because again, we've kind of seen this strategy in place for, I would say, at least the last 50 years plus, where they've intentionally left out so much of the teachings of how this country was founded, why this country was founded from an actual truth standpoint. And they've demonized everything that this country stands for. A little bit earlier in the article, you talk about, feeling patriotic, having love for your nation. And they've completely and intentionally whittled that away. Mm-hmm. What are some things, as they've done that? I mean, what are some things that we can start looking to do to kind of restore the idea, or I guess really talk up and sell people on the ideas that this country was founded on?
Right. So what's nice now is while we still have access to information and it's not completely cut off, there's lots of opportunities now to educate yourself. I mean, I'm not even going to mention my own book, but
please do. Please.
That's a sort of a narrow little thing. But for instance, I'm affiliated a little bit with Hillsdale College. This place in Michigan has tremendous online resources, a lot of stuff for free for people who want to learn about the Constitution, learn about the principles of the Declaration. There's lots of books out there. There's really a wealth of information to counter the misinformation that comes out of the public schools, that comes out of the establishment media. Not everyone wants to buy and read a book, but there's video courses that are available from Hillsdale and other places. There's lots of material out there if you just look. You have to be a little bit careful of avoiding some of the wacky stuff, which also comes from the right, not just from the left.
Sure, no, absolutely.
But do a little research, look for reputable places, legitimate places. And it's nice now that there is a lot of stuff available if you do want to educate yourself.
And there's even books directed at kids.
Yeah,
in that
lots
area.
of them. Sure, sure.
Yeah, this is actually kind of the quote that I was looking for earlier. So without frequent recurrence, that is frequent education, fundamental principles enjoyed by the great documents of the American Revolution, no free government can be preserved to any people. These principles, as the ground of our patriotism, must be defended whenever the nation itself is defended, if necessary. But they cannot be defended politically or by force if they are not defended first and last in the souls of the citizens.
Right.
So, if you don't believe in it, you're not going to stand up for it. And we've done a poor job as a nation, and even a poor job as parents. And I know Summer and I do this more than most, but we've done a poor job even teaching our kids what this country is, what it's founded on, what it means, how important it is, how unique it is. That's something that I think that we could all do as parents. What are some other things that we can do on a regular, like the everyday Joe, that can start making a real difference?
Again, I think local and state politics are where, if we're going to save the country, that's where it's going to be. So again, it sounds like it doesn't make a difference, but it really does, whether it's school board or county government, or if you live in a town that has a mayor. We have a great sheriff here, Nathan Harmon. He's not up again until 2024, but that's not that far away.
No.
But there's other elections in the meantime. Again, talk to your neighbors, educate yourself, find materials to help educate your kids. Again, get healthy, get strong, get self-sufficient. The supply chain, it's entirely possible that medicines could become scarce, right? It's entirely possible that hospitals could be overwhelmed, So there's a lot of things you can do to prepare yourself physically, mentally, intellectually, in terms of the supplies you have. But you have to take the problem seriously, and you have to plan a little bit. Again, the other side is constantly planning and thinking about that. Now, our side needs to do a much better job of thinking ahead and being ready no matter what happens.
Absolutely. And folks, again, just like I said earlier, go ahead and throw up any questions that you have. Aaron, we got any questions over there, or just comments?
Just comments so far.
Feel free to throw up some comments too. We'll read through those.
I mean, Gary and I try to make a point to even sit down to dinner pretty much every night with the kids after school, so that we can kind of grill them a little bit on, what happened at school, what was said. And then, there's been instances where we're like, hold up. That's not really how that goes. And this is what is true information, because the schools do spin things or change the narrative a little bit.
Right.
Yep. It's just a little bit at a time. It's just like if you nudge a boat off course 1 degree at a time, and over the course of 12 plus years that they have somebody in school, I mean, at the end they end up somebody that you don't even recognize, because they have so much power and influence over that. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Maybe I can put on my Ph.D. hat for just one second.
Do it.
Not everyone wants to go to graduate school and study German philosophy and all that stuff. There is, however, a place for that, because a lot of people will know that CRT stuff, right? Critical race theory in schools is wrong, where socialism is wrong. It's not always so easy to have the argument, right? Whether it's with your kids or with your neighbors, they'll say, "Well, I don't agree with that."
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Well, what's wrong with it? Well, that's not always so easy to explain. And so one of the benefits of, if you have the time and the inclination of reading a book and digging into the stuff a little deeper, is to know what the theoretical arguments are, so that you're prepared to talk to your neighbors, to talk to people at church, to explain to your kids, even to know for your own sake. Because it's a lot easier to stand up for something, defend your principles, if you have the intellectual background, the intellectual ammunition to know why you're right and they're wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point. So, like, I just remember the first time that I cared at all about politics. I was 21 years old. We had the Bush-Gore election going on. That was the first time I didn't know anything about it. I didn't really know what the Republican Party stood for. Didn't know what the Democrat Party. All I knew is I had this instinct that, like, I had some sort of urgency that I did not want Gore to become president. I didn't know how, I didn't know why or anything else. And then I remember I didn't know anything about Rush Limbaugh at the time, but I knew that he talked about politics, and I wanted to know more about this. And really, I think what I was searching for, hey, is there other people that feel like I do, and why, right? So I started listening to Rush, and then I started identifying as Republican, and I had this sense of what I believed, but I definitely didn't have a sense of why I believe it. I couldn't articulate, like, I know this is better than socialism, but I don't really know what socialism is in the depths of it. I don't really know how to explain, capitalism. So it definitely helps to definitely educate yourself as much as possible. And you're right, we definitely need the intellects on that side that can break things down in a really responsible and palatable way too. That's part of it too. I think it's just off the top of my head, guys like Jordan Peterson. I mean, they really present things and they break things down in a way that's interesting, engaging, and that is part of the issue. It's one thing if you know it, but can you hold an audience? And that's one thing that the left is definitely doing better. I mean, they're constantly indoctrinating you through comedy, through entertainment, all of these things. You don't even realize it. And the right doesn't. We don't do it nearly as much.
You're absolutely right about that. Yeah, very good point.
Yeah.
What's some other comments that we had up there? Daryl Kramer, you can see how uninvolved our side is based on how few viewers we have tonight compared to Guns and Gear Talk.
I think we're being censored a little bit, I'll be honest with you. I think there's some algorithm stuff going on.
Regardless of that. What else we got? Angel
Yeah,
Tuttle
we
Twins.
have the Tuttle Twins.
Rush Revere. I have been meaning to order some Rush Revere for the kids for a while.
We have Tuttle Twins, but we don't.
I'm definitely going to do that. That was something I kept meaning to do even while Rush was still alive.
There's also another line by the same people that do the Tuttle Twins. It's for older kids too. So we have those also.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So. Yeah, so the other thing that you talk about, you kind of talk a little bit about, I had never heard of Jaffa before I started kind of looking at a lot of your stuff. Just real quickly, I actually started, I saw a lot of talk, I saw you did several talks on Jaffa himself and on your book about him, but then I actually started looking for video of Jaffa on YouTube and things like that. And he's really a pretty amazing guy. He definitely, I hate to put him in a box, but he definitely reminded me a lot of his characteristics and some of the things he talks about. He reminded me a lot of Rush Limbaugh. So if you will, just talk a little bit about him. I guess he was a big mentor.
Yeah. So Harry Jaffa taught for many, many years at Claremont in Southern California, which is where I went to graduate school, and I studied with him and got my doctorate there. And he lived to be 96, died in 2015, had a very long scholarly career, wrote 2 really important major books on Lincoln and the Civil War, and then lots of other scholarship and writing on the principles of the founding and the Declaration of Independence. His students founded the Claremont Institute, which is the think tank where I'm associated, and they continue to carry on his work and apply his teaching to policy issues and controversies. And Jaffa was trained in political philosophy. And so I keep coming back to this question of philosophy and theory, in part because it really helps you understand things. It helps you see the big picture. And he brought the whole tradition of Western philosophy going all the way back to Plato and Aristotle and Rome and Christianity and Thomas Aquinas. And all of that really informed the founders drew on the whole Western tradition to explain the kind of republicanism that they were creating. And Jaffa did, I think, a wonderful job of showing the great inheritance that we have and how all of that came into play, and did a wonderful job showing the background and the fundamentals of what the founding fathers did, where our rights come from, what equality means, what it means to say the laws of nature and nature's God. That's actually a sort of a complicated phrase. Mm-hmm. And what he also showed is there's a lot there to be inspired by. And that's one thing I wanted to mention just a moment ago. I do some talks at colleges, and I run across a lot of younger people, and I see younger people on Twitter, and a lot of them are very cynical. They're turned off by clown world. They think the world is so degenerate, and they're even turning against democracy. They're turning against, because they're so disgusted by what's going on. And I want to remind them that, in a way, this is an opportunity to be great. Times of crisis is when great people emerge. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot in our tradition to be inspired by. There's a lot of heroism to be motivated by. And so this is not a time to be cynical and give up and abandon politics. It's just the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the thing that struck me about him was that you could tell I just loved his confidence. He projects a certain confidence on stage, and you could, he doesn't shy away from. Yeah, I think that I know personally that is what I am constantly looking for in a leader of our values, right? Whether we're talking about conservative Republican, and that's what I think drew so many people to Trump, right? I mean, he's not ashamed of anything. He puts it out there. He's like, this is what I believe. You can bite around the edges. You can throw it apart, whatever. But he didn't care, and we've got to get more like that. We got to be able to present our case with some confidence.
And then when heat was applied from the other side, he didn't back down either.
No.
He stood his ground.
No, we're constantly apologizing. We're constantly for stuff that we have no business apologizing for. And it's just so frustrating. And I'm just tired of weak people.
Yeah, my teacher Jaffa, who we were talking about, who I wrote the book about, was always getting into arguments with people, and he never took it personally. His attitude was, look, I want to get at the truth. I want to figure out what's right, and we don't have time to have our feelings hurt. I mean, come on, we're grown-ups here, right? And he was always accused of being quarrelsome and getting into fights with people. And he thought, well, yeah, I mean, some things are worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
Well, that's the thing is like everybody's, I just feel like we're at an existential threat moment where it's like it's like this comet's coming towards us and everybody's like, I'm like, there's a comet coming. We're about to die. Somebody do something. And everybody's like, let's talk to it. Throw it some teddy bears or something.
Surely we can negotiate.
We're just completely, we just become completely lackadaisical when it comes to that. And just, again, it's just that's probably the one thing about the Republican Party and the conservative movement in general. Just, they're so limp-wristed. They just back down every single time. And I'm tired of it. And there's very few people in our party that are willing to stand up. And then those people in our party are considered pariah within our own party, whether you're talking about Ted Cruz, whether you're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, whoever it is. You know what I wish we had? I wish we had more people like AOC, right? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. At least she stands up, and look at the following that she has. She inspires people all over, and it's not because that her ideas or the substance is there. And it's not even because she's an attractive lady. It's because she has confidence and she believes what she says. I don't think she can explain what she's talking about. I really don't. But man, she says it with confidence, and she's afraid to back. She's not afraid. She doesn't back down from anybody. She's not afraid of anybody, and she goes at it. And she at least acts like a leader, even if I think she's intellectually void when it comes to a lot of those things. But she's winning it, man. Yeah. You talk about Kessler. In a long cover story from National Review, Kessler wrote, "What central ideas of our political tradition become blurred and obscured when Americans no longer understand what it is to make them people, make them a people, then they will cease to be a people, and the noble and reasonable tradition will decay into ideology. When that happens, spiritedness, the prideful assertion of dignity and independence that characterizes American citizenship, is severed from its connection to reason, and American self-government collapses upon itself." There's a lot, but
yeah. So to be an American citizen always meant to combine spiritedness, and this is an interesting word. It goes all the way back to the ancient Greek philosophers. The Greek word is thumos, for anyone who cares. But it meant,
I care.
but it meant a kind of manliness, and it didn't necessarily mean to exclude women. My professor Jaffa used to say one of the most manly politicians of the 20th century was Margaret Thatcher, right? But it means being willing to assert yourself, to stand up for what's right, to have some moral indignation when you see injustice, to stand up for what's right, but also has to be combined with a reasonable understanding of what's right. It doesn't mean just being violently aggressive to no purpose. It means standing up for the right things, right? Being manly for the right things. But that has to be combined with a moderation that also respects other people's rights. And it turns out the founders knew this, and we've sort of forgotten. Self-government is hard. It requires a level of education. It requires certain moral habits. It requires certain virtues. And we forgot to teach all of that stuff. And now we're reaping the consequences of that.
Absolutely. Well, I think we got it to a point to where, like, we're so accepting of so many things that nothing is unacceptable anymore. I mean, it's just like whatever goes. I mean, if we took some of today's headlines and some of the topics of today and we sent them back in time to 15, even 10 years ago, we'd be like, no, that's not what would happen. But we've become so accepting of so many just nonsense. It's crazy. And again, it goes back to exactly that. We're completely lacking spiritedness. We're no longer lacking a spine, and we're still afraid. Just like you said, we don't want to be combative all the time, but it's smart to be able to precisely direct a little bit of aggression every now and then in the right manner, in the right direction. Yeah, being assertive and being confident in what you believe.
Yeah, the political version of trigger control, right?
Exactly.
You want to be ready, but you want to be in control.
Yeah.
Of what you're
well
doing.
aimed fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. You talk a little bit about how the Claremont writers played an enormous role in pushing William Buckley, National Review, and the whole conservative movement toward a greater focus in the appreciation for American founders. A good argument can be made that if it were not for Jaffa's 60 years of influential scholarship, he died in 2015 at 96, the New York Times and its allies would not have found it necessary to launch the 1619 Project. So just for our viewers, please explain all that, but also
Sure.
more importantly, explain the 1619 Project.
So the 1619 Project is this terrible propaganda effort. It was really pushed by the New York Times to refound the country away from what the Founding Fathers did with the Declaration of Independence, move the birth date away from 1776 to 1619 when the first slaves were brought in. And basically it's to make the whole country turn on the question of slavery and the history of slavery and make race the central focus of everything. And it's literally, they say this openly, it's literally an attempt to reframe the entire meaning of the country and make race the center of everything and replace 1776 with 1619. And now it's spread from the New York Times into schools. The Smithsonian Institution is behind it. There's curriculum that's been developed and it's in schools all over the place, and it's terrible. The 1776 ideas, so this is getting back a little bit into some history of the conservative movement going back into the 50s and 60s and 70s. When the modern conservative movement started, it was a little unclear of what it wanted to conserve. There were some people who had romantic notions of the Middle Ages and old Europe. There was a lot of nostalgia for the old Confederate South, which had some problems, right? But there was not a lot of focus on Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and George Washington. There was sort of vague patriotic feeling, but the idea that these are the central principles, the understanding of those principles should inform the conservative movement, that was a little bit more vague than you might suspect. And Jaffa, who became friends with Bill Buckley and pushed National Review and Buckley and the conservative movement to make the founding and the Constitution and the Declaration the things that we want to conserve. And he really played a much greater role than people appreciate for pushing the conservative movement to that emphasis on the spirit of 76, the American Revolution, as the thing we want to conserve.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
You have quite the comment feed going too.
What, got any other good comments up here?
I don't know what's going on, but I see a whole bunch of stuff going on.
What's that?
I said I don't know.
No, I was saying, Aaron.
Oh.
You want to respond?
Sure. Well, is it worth responding to?
Not really.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Look like Dan's up there fighting the fight. So
Good. All right.
Keep going, Dan.
I don't have any patience for silliness tonight. You talk a little bit about all through this in between that point and the next one is you talk a little bit about what's going on in basic situation or our current situation when it comes to the conservative movement. But you say in the meantime, give up on the ideas that conservatives have anything useful to say, except the fact that what we need is a counter-revolution, learn some useful skills, stay healthy, and get strong.
That's what he's
So
been
talk
saying
about,
for years.
no, absolutely.
You got to give up on the trying to preserve and just go at it.
Yeah.
So when I feel like I know what you're talking about there when you talk about, give up on the fact that conservatives don't have very much useful thing to say. Who has a large voice now, or some of the people that you feel have a large voice that are pointing us in the right direction that people should really kind of follow, listen to, and learn from?
Sure. So I've been following Jordan Peterson for a long time. I actually reviewed his book. The Claremont Institute, where I'm associated, has a book review, Claremont Review of Books, and I reviewed Jordan Peterson's book like 5 years ago and went to see him speak in Washington, D.C.
12 rules.
The 12 Rules for Life,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't agree with everything Jordan Peterson says. Sometimes he shoots his mouth off on some things where he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Yep. But by and large, he's been a real force for good. I mean, it goes back to some of the things we were talking about, like the proper understanding of manliness, how to take care of yourself, how to be self-sufficient in a sort of an intellectual, emotionally mature way. If you're a man, be a man. If you're a woman, be a woman. Mm-hmm. I mean, that sounds like a crazy thing to say, but we've sort of forgotten that.
We both have value in society. There are many things that I'm good at that Gary is not, and there are many things that Gary is good at that I'm not.
Exactly.
I don't know about that first point.
And, I've heard many stories that Jordan Peterson has really helped young people who were lost. And
I agree with that.
the idea of, finding something that's meaningful in your life and finding something. So, Peterson's a great model.
I think he's very good at breaking it down, like Gary said, and almost to a point where you're listening and you go like, oh, it's like a light bulb moment. You're like, oh, it makes perfect sense now.
Well, he breaks down those. Number one, I think the problem is a lot of people in his position talk in kind of large clumps, right? Whether we're talking about conservatism, we'll talk about, but he kind of shows you how to get to each one of those tenets by the little things. He talks about, whether it's get up and make your bed in the morning. It's those little things that he shows you that, hey, this is important, this is important, this is important. And he'll explain why each one of those is so important, how they play a role in your life. And then that leads you to a larger, whether we're talking about free speech or this larger item up at top. And I think that's where he does a really good job explaining some of those points.
Not on the, so we've talked a little bit about the intellectual side. If you want to sort of get some intellectual stuff, Claremont.org is the website. On another side, especially for younger people, especially for younger guys who are feeling sort of cynical and people who are sort of repelled by the weakness and pushing a kind of effeminacy on the culture. There's a book I read a couple of years ago by an African-American guy named David Goggins called You Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah, Dave Goggins.
Yeah. And it's
former SEAL.
Yeah. Former SEAL and ultramarathon runner. And I read it. And the book is, he was terribly abused as a child, but the book is basically his triumph through the terrible abusive childhood he had and how through willpower and discipline and basically just believing in himself, he became this incredible success. He went into the military. He became this incredible athlete. And so if especially a boy who needs a little inspiration and needs something to show that, here's a guy who had it much worse than anything you're complaining about and fought his way through. So yeah, so there's stuff like that out there. That's one I would recommend.
Have you read anything by Jocko Willink?
I know who Jocko is. Yep. He's a even meaner, bigger looking guy than you.
He just said you look mean. I'm just kidding.
Right, I'm mean. I meant a big.
I'm just kidding.
I haven't read anything by Jocko, but
I still scare Summer a little bit, which is why she's attracted to me.
But yeah, no, there's guys like that out there who. Martial arts is a great thing. If not everyone wants to necessarily shoot a gun, but if you want to get healthy and get involved in some martial arts, that's a great thing. Just the psychological benefit of being able to defend yourself is a great thing, both for boys and girls.
See a lot of martial arts centered stuff. They have a great mindset too.
Yeah.
As far as lifestyle and survival skills and becoming self-sufficient.
Right.
It all plays in.
Well, it's all about, really what it comes down to is a lot of those things start teaching self-reliance. And I think, again, when you really, if you were to kind of condense down the liberal movement more than anything, it's moving away from self-reliance. The more you rely on government for everything, the more control they have over you, the more enticing their arguments become, because you don't want to let some of those go. And so self-reliance in any manner. And, again, that's why you may not want to shoot a gun, but guess what? You can treat yourself or treat your loved one when it comes to our medical courses. So again, folks, make sure you go to our medical courses. Even if you're anti-gun, you need a medical course because they're not going to be there in time, right? So,
Yeah. The young guys that I talk to at college campuses and even sometimes a little younger teenagers are very aware of this. They make fun of the soy boys, but they're very aware that the popular culture, not just the government, but the corporations, seem to be pushing them to be weak and unhealthy. The corporate food, the industrial food that they're pushed on people with the seed oils and the empty carbohydrates and all of that stuff, stay at home. Yeah. Estrogen and soy and all that stuff. And, this whole, just sit in front of a TV all day playing video games.
Being assertive at all is bad.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Basically, girl power, everything's all about the girls. And if you're toxic masculinity, all of this stuff. And so there need to be healthy outlets for that. And unfortunately, if you don't provide, especially the boys with the healthy outlets, they're going to go off into unhealthy outlets. And so that's something we really need to focus on, is providing outlets for both boys and girls to develop themselves properly. martial arts and other things can be really useful for that.
No, there's definitely a very strategic move to demonize any sort of masculinity.
Yep.
And again, I don't think it's about demonizing masculinity. I think it's a way to move you away from self-reliance. And again, imagine the idea that they are pushing to say, hey, you know what, it's actually better to be a single mom. I mean, that's what has been going on for, again, the last 50, if not 60 years. It's better to be a single mom is the idea, where you're getting rid of the father. That means they know at that point that the mother is going to be more dependent on food stamps, more dependent on the government, more dependent on, government health care, more dependent on government, public schools, all these things, which again is just feeding them into the pipeline to make them more dependent on their ideology. And I think that, again, it's just so diabolical, it's so insidious, and it's so strategic. Again, it's just so well planned, and they're executing it flawlessly, and it scares the crap out of me. It scares the crap out of me how smart they are and how dumb we've been with so much of this.
Yeah, weak people are easy to control. And so if you want to control people, you make them weak. It's pretty obvious.
And then, but what's better is they can convince you that weakness is a strength, and your dependence on them is better than independence or self-reliance on you. Right. It's just it's crazy.
That's why these Canadian truckers are heroes of mine. I mean, can you imagine the left now? Here's the ultimate working class, right? Here's the workers are rising up to defend themselves, and all these people who claim to be, liberals defending the working class just hate these truckers. Oh, yeah. It just shows you how phony they are.
Because they don't have control.
Right? Well, and I actually posted about that today. It just shows you where the liberals and Democrats, I don't even know what all they are in Canada. I know they're liberals, but they portray themselves as all for the blue collar. But the moment that the blue collar is stepping out of line, man, they just want to crush them. They're talking about slashing their tires. Whitmer's talking about sending equipment over to basically heavy equipment to lift their trucks off the Ambassador Bridge and whatever other equipment Canada needs so that we can forcefully remove these people. Right. You're going to start a civil war.
I mean, it's just like the Liberal Party proclaims to be inclusive of, whatever you want to be, we're good with that. Mm-hmm. But the minute you're not a certain thing.
Yeah.
And it's class snobbery too. I mean, you read some of these liberals in Ottawa, and these working class truckers. These guys are like the cowboys of the modern era. They're out on their own, right? Independent, working for a living, and there's definitely a lot of left-wing snobbery against these guys.
And my dad was a truck driver for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. You talk about stepping out of line. Let somebody like Herschel Walker talk to you about how demonized you get if you're an African American and you're not, or if you're an African American and you are conservative, or whoever it is. We got Alan West. Those guys just get destroyed by the media, and it's not because, again, they say that they're for African Americans. They say they're for minorities, but as soon as any of those minorities step out of line, both within their own group, the tribalism that we have going on, but definitely the media just does everything they can to undermine them, destroy them, and it's actually sad to watch. Candace Owens is another good example.
I'll just mention one more, Clarence Thomas.
Yeah. Oh,
the best member of the Supreme Court, and the only member of the Supreme Court who has quoted my professor Harry Jaffa in the Supreme Court ruling.
He doesn't. It's just in the last few years he's even started talking on the bench. He used to
never say anything. Right.
It's actually cool to see. I forgot what I was watching one, and he was just sitting there, and then he started talking. I think everybody almost lost their mind about what was going on there. Again, we got any other questions going up here? Any other comments worth posting there?
Not yet.
All right, sweet.
Just something else going on, I guess.
Well, again, folks, make sure you go to ParamountTactical.com. Go to check out our upcoming training schedule. Again, we'd love to have you out. We're definitely going to have Glenn out here, do some training with us too. And what else, Glenn? What else is on your heart and mind?
Let's say I'm very happy to be in West Virginia. I've been going back to DC every once in a while. Had some property there, and I still have Claremont Institute has an office downtown by Union Station. Still have some books and stuff there, and so I still go into the city every now and then. And the longer I'm in West Virginia, the more disgusted I am every time I have to go back to DC. And I see people walking around with, little kids masked up, walking outside on the street. And so West Virginia Panhandle has been very welcoming to me, and I'm grateful to everyone here,
Good.
to my neighbors.
What are some other, you talked about, what are some, point people more to some of your books?
Okay, so my own book is called The Soul of Politics, Harry V. Jaffa and the Fight for America. And it's pitched at a sort of a high level, but I think I try to explain to people why his thought is relevant, how he ties in ancient Greek thought and Rome and Christianity and modern liberalism to explain what the founding fathers were doing, to explain what the Civil War was about, in a way that I try to make relevant to what's going on today. Claremont Institute has a whole series of scholars. If you want to know more about the founding, one of our scholars is a guy named Professor Tom West, who teaches at Hillsdale. He has two good books. One is called Vindicating the Founders, which basically responds to a bunch of attacks on them, that they were anti-women and all these things. And then another one, also a little bit deeper, but accessible, called The Political Theory of the American Founding, which explains some of the background. If you want to know where America went wrong, that happened about 100 years ago with what was called the Progressive Movement, and some crazy German ideas were imported by people like Woodrow Wilson and Herbert Crowley, and basically the universities were infected by some very bad political science, which then trickled out into the culture. My roommate in grad school, his name is R.J. Pastrito, has written some very good books on progressivism, and Woodrow Wilson, who is probably one of our worst presidents ever, the only college professor to become a president, which shows you why that's a terrible idea, and brought a lot of bad academic ideas into the presidency.
What was your friend's name, the author's name?
Pastrito, P-E-S-T-R-I-T-T-O. Another one of my professors was Charles Kessler. He's the editor of the Claremont Review of Books. If you're interested in sort of a high-level review of interesting political and cultural books, the CRB, as we call it, the Claremont Review of Books, is a resource people could check out.
And you said Hillsdale College has a lot of
Hillsdale College has all sorts of online stuff on the Constitution, on Western history. Victor Davis Hanson has, I think, a course on World War II, if people are interested in that. Courses on, ancient Rome, all sorts of stuff. And a lot of that is free if you just go to hillsdale.edu.
Folks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together a list of the stuff you said, put some links together so that we make that available, and then I'll send it by you and see if there's anything you want to add or correct me on that
Sure.
list. But we want to make sure that you have the tools that you need. And again, like you said, I know Rush Limbaugh used to mention Hillsdale College all the time. They have a great, study of the Constitution that's broken down for even younger kids that can understand that. So there's definitely a bunch of free resources there. I'm definitely very interested in getting into the Claremont Institute, some of their book reviews. You were talking about where America went wrong. I would love to see the breakdown of that. That's something that is very interesting to me.
Yeah, and that feeds directly into the things we're seeing today. I mean,
Right.
Critical race theory, the socialism, the rise of the bureaucracy. Like, how did we replace representative government with this immense bureaucracy, which isn't really answerable to everyone? Where did this idea that Fauci, as a scientist, should be the de facto president of the United
Well, he is
States
science.
and say, I am science?
Yeah.
That whole idea of scientific expertise replacing representative government by the people has a background, and that goes back to the progressive movement. So there's it's actually kind of interesting if you want to dig into this stuff of where these things came from, because there is an explanation behind a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and that's and I guess that's the thing that I have realized more and more over the years is you kind of think that these things are just sort of come to be because of current circumstances, but it's not. Again, it's been planned. It's strategic. It's thought out. And they just execute it so well. I mean, they're just, they're doing a good job, and we got to figure out how to combat it more effectively.
Right.
Well,
Or we're going to find ourselves, and again, we're going to find ourselves in a torn country, and it's going to be really, really bad.
yeah, no, it's okay. Go ahead.
What else?
No, that's it.
So one little cause for hope, because
Yeah.
I don't want to ever end
No.
on being too
Please
negative.
give us some hope.
One is Professor Jaffa used to say all the time, and one of his favorite stories was, one of his heroes was Winston Churchill, and one of his favorite stories was in 1940, May 1940, things looked very bad for Britain, right? The Nazis had taken over continental Europe. They were just across the English Channel. England basically, this is before America comes into the war, England basically had no allies. And all sorts of people in England are saying, let's just make a deal with Hitler. You know, we can't fight by ourselves. And Hitler called a meeting of the War Cabinet in May 1940 and gave this rousing talk and said, if this story of England is to end, let it only end when each of us lies on the floor choking in our own blood. And he basically shamed the cabinet so much that they all cheered and they said, all right, let's fight. And then Churchill went on the radio and rallied the British people. And as bleak as things looked in May 1940, it looked like Britain was certain to be defeated. America came into the war. Things changed. So history is never determined. Jaffa said that all the time. You never know. All you can do, another phrase he really liked is, we cannot guarantee success, but we can deserve it. So never give up the fight. Don't despair. You never know what's going to happen. Things can change in unexpected ways. So prepare yourself mentally, physically, emotionally. Don't give up. Have hope. And you never know what's going to happen.
Very
That's
true.
right. And all this stuff starts at home, folks. So, train your kids too. They're being indoctrinated. They're going to be indoctrinated by someone. It might as well be you with your, it might as well be you with really good principles.
There's no shame in mine and Gary's game. We will tell you,
we indoctrinate the crap out of them. Hey, folks, listen, we really appreciate you, everybody tuning in. We really appreciate. Thank you again, Glenn, for showing up. This was by far, to me, the most engaging, fun, and interactive free for all Friday that we've done. So I really appreciate you coming on. I love this, and
I've enjoyed it too.
It's been a great honor to have you here and to speak to all of our clients and people out there. And what's great is all the people that are going to see this, for months on end. We're going to post this up on YouTube. And people are going to see this, going to come back and watch it, and it's going to reach the right people. I do really believe that. But again, folks, we really appreciate all your support. Make sure you go to ParamountTactical.com, go check out our upcoming training schedule. Make sure you go check out our online store. If you're not following us on Twitter, Instagram, and all that good stuff, make sure you do that. Please like, subscribe, all the normal stuff. Hey, we really appreciate your time. Thank you. Summer and I do, and continue to work hard, do great things. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready, and we'll talk to you soon.